Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be looking at the equation of a circle. So we've had a brief look at equations of circles before, and the general equation of a circle is x squared plus y squared is equal to the length of the radius squared. So if I was to draw a very simple circle, a very basic circle would be x squared plus y squared is equal to 1. So the length of our radius is 1. So if I was going to draw my circle, I would have the center of the circle at 0, 0. So the center of the circle is at 0, 0. And then I would have all of my points of intersection. So I'd have this point here, which would be at x is equal to 1. I'd have this point here at x is equal to -1. I'd have this point here at y is equal to 1. And then I'd have this point here at y is equal to -1. So we've seen this before. Now, what we're going to be looking at today is we are actually going to be looking at the transformed version of a circle. So when I transform a circle, effectively what I'm doing is I'm going to be translating it horizontally by h number of units. So this, whenever we have our x value, it's always manipulated in the opposite direction to what we think. So in this case, if I was to manipulate this circle to say x take 1, that's going to shift this entire circle by 1 in the positive direction. Okay, so that's going to move all my intercepts over as well. So we would have to recalculate our intercepts. Now, similarly here, because we are squaring this value, this is actually going to be backwards to what we think for the y value as well. So if this was actually y take 1, this wouldn't shift this down by 1, this would actually shift the circle up by 1. So it's shifting it in the opposite direction to what we think for the y value as well. And the reason for that is because we are squaring this whole term. Okay, so let's have a go, right? So all we need to remember that if it's in the form x take h squared and y take k squared, then the center of our circle is going to be found at hk. All right, so let's have a go. So this first example here, we've got x squared plus y take 3 squared is equal to 1. So let's have a look at this in our form that we had it before. Okay, so if we've got x take h squared plus y take k squared is equal to our radius squared, then here we can see that our value of h is going to be equal to 0, and we can see our value of k is going to be equal to 3. So we know straight away that the center of our circle is going to be at 0, 3. The other information that we know is we know that the length of our radius is 1. So if I was to write r squared is equal to 1, then our value r is just going to be equal to 1. So this is a very simple circle to draw. So let's draw this in. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pop in the center of my circle. So this is going to be at 0, 3. So this is my center here. The other piece of information I know is I know the length of my radius. So if I was going to draw this radius, right, so if I was going to draw my circle, the length of the radius is going to be 1 all the way around the circle. So if I'm here at 0, 3, I'm going to add 1 and subtract 1 to get the x values, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the y values, okay? So all I'm going to do, I'm going to move up 1, I'm going to move down 1, I'm going to move across 1, oops, I'm going to move across 1, I'm going to move across 1. And so those are going to be all of the edges of my circle. Okay. So when I draw this, I always draw this using dotted lines because I can't really draw a perfect circle by hand. I'm not super great at it. Once I've drawn those dotted lines in and I really sort of get the idea of the circle, that's when I go back in and I redraw it so it's nice and neat. All right, let's have a look at this second example here now. Okay, so the first thing that we want to think about, so we want this to be in the form x take h squared plus y take k squared is equal to r squared. So in this case, we can see, since this is negative h, this is positive 3, that means that h must be equal to negative 3. And for y, y must be equal to negative 2. So the center of our circle is going to be at negative 3, negative 2. So it's the opposite to what we think. And again, this is because we're squaring these values, okay? That's what makes it different to the functions we've seen previously. The other piece of information we know that r squared is equal to 9, and so r is equal to 3. So the length of my radius is equal to 3. So let's go ahead and let's draw our circle now. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to pop in the center of our circle, so at -3 and -2. So this is the center of my circle. Now again, just like we did before, my center of my circle is at -3, -2. So for my radius is going to extend out by 3 along each of these axes now. Okay, so if I'm looking at my x value, I'm going to go 3 in this direction to start with. So I'm at -3, so that means it's going to be right on 0. And I'm going to go back 3, so I'm at -6. Same thing with my y. Oh, I've just realized I've done +2 instead of -2. Whoops. So let's try that again, shall we? So -3, -2, so down here. So my x value is going to be 3 here, and 0 here, and then -6 here. Now my y value, so I'm at -2, I'm going to go up 3, so it's going to go up to 1, and then going down is going to go down to about -5, so down to about here. And just using that information alone, I could draw my circle. But what we can see here is that this is going through these different intercepts. So I actually should probably find the values of these intercepts as well. Okay, so I'm going to write on my graph here. So we already know that this intercept is going to be at 0, -2. So I've already found one. So to find these intercepts here, this is along my x-axis. So I'm going to find my x-intercept, and my x-intercept is when y is equal to 0. So we're going to have x plus 3 squared plus 0 plus 2. So that's just going to be 2 squared is equal to 9. So x plus 3 squared is going to be equal to 5. So x plus 3 is equal to the positive or negative square root of 5. So therefore x is going to be equal to -3 plus or minus square root of 5. So this is going to be equal to our -3 plus root 5. This is going to be equal to our -3 minus root 5. And I'm going to leave that in there with the surds just because I think that that is more of an exact value. Okay, so that is how we draw our circles. So when it's in this form with the center of the circle and the radius given to us, it's really, really easy to do this because we can identify the center straight away. We can use the length of our radius to find the edges of the circle, and then we can go ahead and we can find our intercepts if we need to so that we can label them on our graph. So what happens though if we are not given our circle in this really nice center form? So I'll show you an example where this is not the case. Okay, so here we have an example where it's not in that center form, and I really want to get it back into that form because it's so much easier to actually draw a circle given that information. Otherwise, we have to go back to our old methods where we find our x-intercept, we find our y-intercept, we have to then try and find out where the center of the circle is by halving those two values. It's a whole mess. It's a whole thing. So completing the square is actually the best method to do this. And I know I can already imagine you guys just cringing because I know that people really are scared of completing the square, but it is the best method to do this. So if you can't remember how to do completing the square, I do have other videos on this channel about how to do that. So I really urge you to go back and have a look at those. Okay, so we actually have two different variables here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our x values together and then we'll put our y values together. And we're going to do separate completing the squares on each of the x's and y's. So I might do this in different colors just to make it a little bit easier. So starting off, we've got 2x squared plus 12x. So it's my x's. Then we have 2y squared minus 4y. And then we have our constant plus 3 is equal to 0. Okay, so to make this a little bit easier for myself, I can already see that these are all factors of 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to divide my whole equation by 2 so that we have x squared plus 6. Oh, sorry, that should be 6x. Then we have plus y squared minus 2y plus 3 over 2 is equal to 0. So now let's go ahead. Let's do our completing the square method. So summary about completing the square method. Now that we've got a coefficient of 1 out the front, we're going to halve it and square it. Okay, so for this, that means we're going to do x squared plus 6x. Now half this would be 3. So 3 squared would be 9. Okay, so there's a little refresh here. So y squared minus 2y. So half this would be -1. -1 squared would be +1. All right, so since we're adding in these extra terms, in order to keep this balance, I'm going to subtract these, okay? So we have -9, -1 is equal to 0. Okay, so now let's go ahead. Let's do our completing the square. We've made our perfect squares. So we have x plus 3 squared plus y take 1 squared. And that is going to be equal to, now if I add these all up, -9, -1 makes -10. -10 plus 3.5, or sorry, 3 over 2, or 3 halves is 1.5. So -10 plus 1.5 is going to be -8.5. So when this comes over to the other side, that's going to become +8.5 there. Okay, and that is it. We've got our circle in that form now. So we can go ahead. We know that our radius is equal to 8.5, so r squared is equal to 8.5. Now see here how we've got a really ugly value. That's unfortunate, but that's okay. So that's going to be equal to the square root of 8.5. So our radius is not going to be nice and neat and tidy this time. But we have the center of our circle. So if I was going to write this, this is going to be x take h squared plus y take k squared is equal to our radius squared. So we have h is equal to -3. We have k is equal to +1. And so we know the center of our circle is at -3, 1. And our radius is equal to the square root of 8.5. So using this information now, let's go ahead, let's draw our circle. So square root of 8.5 is approximately 2.92. So pretty close to 3 there, but not quite exact. All right, so let's go ahead. Our center of our circle is at -3, 1, so -3 and 1. So we've got our center here. We're going to add about 3 in this direction. Okay, so we're not quite getting to 0. We're not quite passing that there. Whoops. And that is because this is equal to 2.92. So we've got about 0.08 left on this little gap here. All right, similarly, if we're going back 3, or approximately 3, I should say. So this is going to go back just before -6, okay? Looking at our y value now, so this is equal to 1, so this is going to be 3.92, so going up about 3, so not quite reaching, but very close to, and then going back down by about 3, so 1, 2, 3, so just before -2, just before like that. Okay, so those are our edges of our circle, so we can roughly draw that in now. And we can see again that we've got 2 intercepts that we need to find, and they are going through the x-axis. So I'm only going to find the x-intercept when y is equal to 0. So we have x plus 3 squared is plus -1 squared is equal to 8.5. Okay, so rearranging this, we get x plus 3 squared is equal to 7.5, because this is going to become +1, taking this over. This is going to then become -1 on this side. X plus 3 is equal to the square root of 7.5. And so x is going to be equal to -3 plus or minus the square root of 7.5. So let's write this in fractional form. So 7.5, that's the same as saying 15 over 2. Okay, so this intercept here is going to be my intercept at -3 plus root 15 over 2. And then this intercept here is going to be at -3 minus root 15 over 2. Okay, so there we go. So that's how we draw our circles. So a bit of a long video, quite a bit in there. So let's summarize. So when we are drawing our circle, we always want to get it into the form x take h squared plus y take k squared is equal to our radius squared. And that's because it tells us immediately the center of our circle at hk. It also immediately tells us the length of our radius r. Okay, so we always want to get it back into this form. Once we've done that, if we need to, we can go ahead and find any intercepts of the circle. If it's not in that form, if it's in the general form, we need to use completing the square. Okay, so go back, watch the videos on completing the square. All right, guys, lots in that one. Enjoy. I'll see you in the next video.